YouTube. Did Sarah get it?
No, I don't know if she's having some technical issues. We may have to start without her.
Okay. Everything.
Thankfully, we have a full roundtable.
Full. Hopefully she's okay. I don't have her number.
I just texted her.
Oh, what was that? Is that Rob? Yep, that sounds like Rob's feet.
Wow, it got really quiet real fast.
So just so you know, we're the live stream or the YouTube live stream is up right now.
Good. Perfect.
It's gonna be exciting. It's gonna be awesome. Space.
Space is always exciting.
Totally boring. Most boring subject ever.
If only we lived in space.
We live in space already. We're all in space. When you think about it.
That is exactly correct. Ah, my goodness. So Tom's gone. We bored Tom.
I think I went to call Sarah. No.
Yeah, sorry. I was just making a call.
I think we all brought our space game with our backgrounds today.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
I feel like mine's the least spacey here.
You got a space shuttle behind you.
A shuttle, yeah.
And you have the Enterprise.
We have two Enterprises, one behind Bobak, one behind Rob.
Oh, you got
There's
it. Oh, that's
a lot of comic books.
Is that the Enterprise or is that the Franklin?
That is the NX-01, I think. Yeah, NX-01 up top.
Very cool. And
You have
I got
the Galaxy class.
Yeah.
I don't have any Enterprises left. I think when I left Tech TV, I left them at work.
Oh yeah,
All
our
those-
set for our show was way cooler than my backdrop, and I wish we had just stolen it all. That's fine.
Had a bunch of polar lights.
It's always tonight, Bobak.
Yeah, well, I think they actually auctioned it all off now because they killed the show. They were just like, "Hey, we'll auction this." That's neat.
So Bobak area, you guys are Bobak. You're down in San Diego, is that right? No.
Pasadena. I'm
And Ariel, are you in Pasadena too?
San Francisco.
San Francisco. All right.
All right. Sarah had a little technical difficulty, but she says she's joining now. So sorry for the slight delay.
Yeah, so we're all West Coast, California, one state.
Can we play like the Jefferson Starship Sarah song for her when she comes on?
That's a great idea.
Right? Sarah.
Great idea.
Sarah.
Cue that up.
Why did your broadband go out?
That's not what we meant.
Exactly.
The only Sarah music I have is Tegan and Sarah.
They don't sing about themselves. I mean, maybe they do, but not by name.
Do I have Jefferson anything?
I really hope so for your sake.
I guess it's Starship at that point.
It is, yeah.
Oh, wait.
Oh, that's gotta stop.
There it is. There it is.
Yeah, I better stop it before YouTube flags it.
YouTube algorithm hammers us.
That's what they. That's
on
what.
top of it. It's fine, right?
Nah, they don't. They flag all that stuff.
It's incredible. It's a pretty cool algorithm that is doing all this.
They even occasionally flag us for mature content when we haven't even started the show, which is weird, but whatever.
It's Ariel's background.
It's the Nabaz tag.
The shuttle was a little bit phallic, guys. I'm not gonna lie. I mean,
Oh my god!
I mean, what are you gonna do?
Let's not get into rockets and shapes today.
The position of the ears on your Nabaz tag is just very suggestive.
I remember those.
I can
Like
pull them off. Can have a one-eared Nabaz tag.
Another piece of technological history.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so.
Do you guys like standing up for these things? It feels like a lot of time to talk and stand.
I have been standing up for a while.
I used to sit, and it was way less comfortable.
Okay.
So I stand now, and by the end, I might sit in the post show after we're done, but it definitely helps me stay a little looser.
It helps me stay alert. So I've got standing desks all over the place. I can put this down, Bobak, if it bothers you.
Oh no, I just was wondering. I was just curious about the personal choice. It wasn't like a criticism or
Yeah.
a judgment.
You're just collecting data. That's all.
Yeah, that's it. Like it's constantly. I like to see what other people's experiences are. One of my big regrets in life is that I can't have more careers. Like I love my job, but I also wish I could have other people's jobs.
Just go independent, and then you get to pick and choose. Like
That's
I do.
terrifying me. I can't imagine not having a steady.
It can be terrifying. It's true,
Yeah.
but I don't have to stick to any one place, which is awesome.
That's true. That is true.
I jumped from what you guys are doing to computer graphics. So
Yeah. And you obviously you seem happy.
Well,
No.
I'm cheery.
Okay.
let's not go overboard.
Yeah. I'm thinking my second act is going to be State Department if there's still one.
They're still
Really? It's like,
There'll be something called the State Department.
Yeah, I just want to go. Like I want to go
State Department. Awesome.
learn languages, travel abroad.
I
Yeah,
did
that's
apply to a State Department fellow thing. What is it called? I forgot what they're called. They have a fellowship program, but of course I applied within the last year or something. So I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure every application is just going to get rejected from this.
prior to this, I was just on a call with a woman that was she was on the National Science Foundation's board, which is an interesting way to do it too. There's some good stuff there.
Hey
The icon has
guys.
appeared.
Hey, there's Sarah.
Hi. I am so sorry.
Hello, Sarah.
No problem. I'm glad that you were able to get it worked out.
Me
Do
as
we
well.
have your video?
Sure.
Let me check.
Let me move these times just a little smidgen.
Oh yeah, just nudge him. There we go. All right. Everyone, Sarah, do you know everyone?
I know
Cool.
some of you. No, I think I know everybody. Hi everyone.
Hey,
No.
Hey Ariel, it's been so long.
I know,
How are
it's
you
been a while.
doing?
good. How are you?
Oh, really good. Really good. Hi Bobak.
Hello.
Hi.
We should probably get rolling.
Yeah. I'm ready to
Yep.
go. Here we go.
The Daily Tech News Show is powered by its listeners, not outside organizations. If you get value from the show, consider giving a little back. As little as $1 a month keeps great tech news and analysis coming your way commercial-free. Find out more at dailytechnewsshow.com/support.
This is the Daily Tech News Show for Friday, March 30th, 2018. From DTNS headquarters in Los Angeles, I'm Tom Merritt.
And from Studio Feel Lane, I'm Sarah Lane.
Joining us today are a very special panel for our Space Roundtable, starting with Bobak Ferdowsi, Spacecraft Systems Engineer. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Ariel Waldman, Advisor to NASA Innovative Advanced Concepts, is here as well. Thank you, Ariel.
Yeah, thanks.
And Rob DeMilo, CTO of Nimble Collective and a former JPL research project lead on things like Galileo imaging, Mars Observer, part of the U.S. team that worked on the Soviet Union's Venera spacecraft. Not to date you.
No, what you just did.
But welcome, Rob. Good to have you along as well.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
And big thanks to our producer, Roger Chang, for putting all this all together. Good work, Roger.
Woohoo! Yes. Glad. I'm hoping it's going to work out. It's going to work out.
If you're unfamiliar, this is our monthly roundtable show focused this month on space. It's the show we do once a month where we expand the regular show into this discussion. We do a full hour with Sarah, myself, and our guests. And while all our topics are within the realm of tech news, we still want to start with a few tech things you should know.
BuzzFeed posted an internal memo from Facebook Vice President Andrew Bosworth from June 18th, 2016. The memo argued that connecting people with was Facebook's job no matter what. Bosworth wrote, quote, maybe it costs something a life by exposing someone to bullies. Maybe someone dies in a terrorist attack. I'm sorry. It's just a very strange quote. Coordinate on our tools. Adding later that anything that allows us to connect more often de facto is good. Bosworth said he made the post to surface issues and have a debate. Mark Zuckerberg told BuzzFeed that most people at Facebook disagreed strongly with the ideas expressed in the memo.
Yeah, it's the whole Facebook situation is so ridiculous. It's starting to get funny now in a not funny sort of way.
Yeah.
Sometime Sunday morning, China's abandoned Chang'e-1 space station will return to Earth. The station weighs about 18,000 pounds. Now, most of that will break up and burn up on re-entry. The station is not under control, hasn't been since 2016, and it's moving fast, so it's difficult to predict where it will land, though statistically it will be somewhere between latitudes 43 degrees north and 43 degrees south. It is unlikely to be on solid ground, much less populated area, but be interested to find out where it ends up.
Under Armour announced Thursday that 150 million accounts for its MyFitnessPal app had been accessed by attackers in February. Usernames, email addresses, and passwords hashed with bcrypt were exposed. Under Armour is requiring all apps to change their user passwords.
SpaceX launched a group of 10 Next satellites for Iridium Friday with a partially reused Falcon 9. SpaceX has launched 50 satellites for Iridium's Next project so far. They're going to launch a total of 75 for them, and I think there's 81 that will make up the network. It's replacing the world's largest commercial satellite network of low Earth orbitals. SpaceX attempted to recover the fairing, but CEO Elon Musk tweeted that the fairing impacted water at high speed, which probably means they're not going to recover it.
The U.S. FCC has approved SpaceX's plan to launch 4,425 high satellites as part of a broadband network. Half of the satellites will need to be launched within 6 years. The service will be called Starlink and will need to have debris mitigation plan finished before launch. SpaceX will need further approval for lower altitude satellites that would bring its number to 12,000.
And that is a look at the stories of the day. Let's kick off the first of our discussions. Bobak, given some of the SpaceX news that we have here today, what's your perspective on how privatization is working with organizations like NASA, like JAXA and others?
I mean, I think it's a good thing for everybody. Obviously, anytime that we can get cheaper launches, which is ultimately what the goal of privatization is, that means it's just more opportunity for people like NASA, for ESA, JAXA to launch more missions. I don't see them as competitive. I see them as really collaborative. NASA's Commercial Crew Program is an example of that, of course, too, where they're partnering with SpaceX and Boeing to deliver humans to low Earth orbit, to the space station, et cetera. But the idea is just like an airline industry. When I fly cross country, I don't buy my own plane. I don't buy my own, capsule. And the idea would be that NASA can be, buy a seat on a a cabin or in a capsule rather than buying the whole thing each time. And I think that's a great thing for all of us.
Sometimes I think the analog of NASA and these other organizations is a little bit like the FAA, but you bring up a good point. The FAA doesn't need to put people on airplanes to go places, and NASA has a whole lot more of a research purpose for it than say the FAA does.
Yeah, a nice analogy I think is USPS versus FedEx and UPS, right? I mean, companies are finely tuned to optimize the bottom line. And so where the government doesn't really have that kind of an incentive to get things going, I think that it works out well for everybody.
Ariel, how do you feel about the sort of the blending world that we're in?
Yeah, I think it's good. It's been ramping up for quite a while, and I think people are just starting to take notice. I do think that it's frustrating that a lot of people think that it's one or the other, and not that they both need each other. And without each other, they'd both be pretty bad off. if not unbelievable almost. But I think it's something where I appreciate you saying, that NASA does a lot of research, because I think that's what a lot of people forget about the privatization that they see that's going on in the headlines, at least, because a lot of it is, engineering and rocket companies and, people who aren't doing things like astrobiology or, other things. They're enabling, some cheaper flights for that stuff, but they themselves aren't doing it. So just as everyone's been saying, it is a blending and a collaborative thing, and they really need each other.
What do you guys think are the things, if you had to guess, and this is a total guess question, what do you think the things are that privatization of space will end up being the best at, and that the public side will continue to be needed for and be the best at? If you looking in your crystal ball.
Ariel just said it. I mean, it's the government and NASA in general can focus on the science of space, right, and leave the rocketeering and the conveyor belt of getting back and forth to the private sector. Which is what they're really good at doing. So just optimizing, getting that bottom line small, getting the cost per dollar per pound of payload low, so that NASA and JPL don't have to spend their money, $70 million trying to figure out how to get a rocket to Pluto. They can concentrate on the payload that's actually going to go to Pluto.
Bobak, do you think there'll be some less, I don't want to say less scientific, but more practical aspects that these public agencies will still be needed for?
Yeah, I mean, I think things that are in the vein of big technical, pushes, developments. We still see it right with the aeronautics side of NASA, where they're still focused on increasing fuel efficiency for airplanes, working on possibly supersonic, transportation, things like that. So there's a lot of areas where thinking big picture, not just kind of local, what's great for my company, but what sort of technologies might enable rocket companies, as well as still continued presence here on Earth with airplanes. And I see that kind of being a great place for government to still sort of cooperate and coordinate all those efforts, and to continue to obviously do the cutting edge research there. So I like I said, I think that it allows, really, I mean, I think this allows people to sort of optimize what they're doing at another level, right? Where my cat is sneezing adorably. I'm sorry.
That is nothing to sneeze at, cat.
Yeah. But I think that SpaceX's and Boeing's can work on what is best for them, while a large organization can see, think, oh, these strategic developments, perhaps it's solar electric propulsion or winglet technologies for airplanes, whatever those be, could really benefit, and I think ultimately lead to new economic growth in sort of private industry. And that's a great great place, and invest in those upfront kind of big costs as a strategic nation, kind of a nationwide thing that benefits us all, and then leads to hopefully more growth.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be competitive. It can be co-opetition, so to speak. NASA can take the advances from the private companies and build on them, and the research that NASA does and the envelope that it pushes can be used by the private companies, and that, I feel like, is what drives progress for farther forward faster.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now,
go
ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I mean, this is a terribly flawed analogy, but there are things that governments are great at, and where we don't necessarily know that there's an economics involved. We think there might be, but that's a great place for a government to take risk where companies can't. And again, I look at the world today, and I think it's more important than ever for governments to think strategically about the long-term health of their country, and what areas can, as the United States, what can we push forward through government funding to make sure that our economy is robust in the future, that we continue to do cutting edge research across a wide variety of domains, what will benefit our people, all of those things. And I mean, I think they're super synergistic. I just think that it's easy to see these as competition, but I don't ever look over at SpaceX and see they're going to send spacecraft to the moons of Jupiter. It's not really, and there's nothing for them to do there. It's not going to give money back to the stakeholders.
Although the Tesla might end up there if its orbit got perturbed at some point. Who knows?
Yeah.
So I'm I'm wondering, so is there a danger, especially when you involve, politics, to have a lot of those things that are currently done through government agencies kind of pushed over where it suggests, well, the private sector can handle it, right? So there might be kind of a mindset where let's let the government release more and more of these responsibilities, hoping that the private sector will pick it up, that they may not be able to or be willing to, and then you're kind of left in a situation where government doesn't want to do funding, and the private sector only wants to focus narrowly on things that they think they can get a return on long term. How do you combat that? Like, is it more than just education? Is it more than just finding where government private company sponsorships can work to everyone's benefit, kind of thing?
It's definitely a delicate balance. It's something that I think you have to be really careful in educating legislators about it. So an example to me is that after the election, there was talk of climate related satellites, being taken down or no longer serviced or not in operation. And Governor Jerry Brown famously, went to a scientific conference and proclaimed, if Trump shoots our satellites down, California will launch its own, which is incredibly exciting and inspiring to know that we're not going to drop the ball. That said, I immediately became concerned because California, one of the things that it does really great is have a lot of startups, do a lot of, business. And you already have a lot of companies who are doing a lot of satellite production and launching. So no one would be better than California to sort of pick up the slack. The thing that would be scary, though, is if someone like Governor Jerry Brown would then put into legislation things that would only incentivize companies to be doing those satellites, to the point that it would almost prove, to Congress that, the government doesn't need to do this anymore. The private sector picked it up. The problem with that, of course, is that companies change. They change their chief officers. They change over time. They change their missions. They cannot be depended upon as much as government can long term. And so things like that certainly scared me, because I think the private sector should be involved, but we have to be careful about not making it so that we feel like, it's all taken care of, we don't have to worry about it, because I don't think companies can be trusted in the long term, for better or worse.
Sure. And that message gets obfuscated too. I mean, there's a lot of, it happens not just in the space sciences, but in all sciences, where there's this push from the executive branch, or this push from the congressional branch to offload the cost on privatization without a lot of information about what that actually means to forward to some agenda that we're not aware of, right? And so it's pretty easy to make a case to the public that, we're going to save you $1 billion tax dollars if we let these companies handle these particular projects or this particular chunk of science, and it's a bad message. I agree.
Now, turning us to a little bit more positive before we finish up this topic, one of the things that our patrons wanted us to talk about were some of our favorite advancements in the last year or two. Real quickly, as we wrap this section up, do you have any off the top of your head that you're like, this is the cool thing that happened in the last 12, 24 months that I think shows that this is still at a really exciting arena to be paying attention to?
Am I going to get crucified by you two if I mention the Albuquerque drive, which I think is pretty awesome? Like the work getting done there. I mean, there's a researcher named Albuquerque, and I hope I'm not mangling his name, but I suspect I am, that about a decade and a half ago came up with the concept of being able to create drives which were faster than light. And he was taken as a crackpot for a very long time. And now he's gotten a lot of attention. And I believe Bobak, you can tell me one way or the other, but I believe that there's actually funding going on now from NASA to sort of investigate that research a lot more seriously.
I think that's right. I remember vaguely it coming out of I don't believe it's our center, but I do remember some funding for it through a NASA research grant.
Yeah, that to me is
There's some very cautious testing going on, but it's turning out to be worth continuing, is what it sounds like. Yeah. Ariel, Bobak, any of your favorites from the last couple of years?
I mean, for me, so I have so many to go off of, but the big thing that is fundamentally changing everything is the direct detection of gravitational waves. The fact that we don't need to, or we can, in addition to using the electromagnetic spectrum, we can literally be feeling sort of the waves of of black holes, of neutron star collisions, and this opens up an entirely new dimension in astronomy. So, a lot of times they call it multi-messenger astronomy. So now, in addition to looking at things in electromagnetic waves, we can be looking for tiny, tiny little stretches in space-time to tell us about big events that happened long ago in the universe. And this is such an exciting time because we're just at the beginning of an entirely new sort of area of study to opening. So you're going to be having a lot more young people going into astronomy and being experts in gravitational waves, whereas the last several years, it's really been all about, can we even directly detect this thing that we know is predicted? So it's a really, really exciting thing, and it a big fundamental shift in how astronomy can be done.
Yeah, absolutely. Bobak, you have one?
I'll go with the super mundane and practical. I was really excited to see Blue Origin's BE4 engine get tested. I just think it's great to see really an industry popping up. And I know that we've already seen a lot of success from SpaceX, and it's super exciting. I mean, I watched a launch from my balcony this morning, which just still blows my mind that I live in a place where rockets actually go. I forget that living in LA, you don't remember that
there was a rocket out there. Yeah, that's crazy.
But yeah, I mean, Blue Origin is also, is doing great things. It's a super practical and built in America engine, which is also really good news for us. And the fact that they can do it, and sell it to customers like ULA is a great thing. I think
it takes multiple companies to make.
Yeah, it's like a Honda Civic. It's reliable, and that's what we need more of in space. A lot more reliability.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, that music means it's time for us to move on to our next discussion. And Ariel, you wanted to talk about weird and multidisciplinary future of space tech items. What do you got?
There's so many. So yeah, literally just a few minutes before even coming on the show, NASA Innovative Advanced Concepts announced their latest round of funded space tech. Yeah, you can see it up here on the screen. So I haven't even had a chance to look at all the awesome stuff that just got funded. But I'm always excited about with a lot of the advancements that are coming in space exploration that could be really transformative to future space missions, how multidisciplinary they are, involving biologists or material scientists or other things. So a few examples that I personally love that NIAC has funded in the past have been things like solar white, which is a material that reflects 99.99% of the sun's energy, which is outperforming all other materials that we've used on spacecrafts. So stuff like that, which uses a form of titanium dioxide, allows spacecrafts to get closer to the sun, but it's also incredibly enabling for things like the future of human missions to Mars, because it can keep things like liquid oxygen incredibly cool, which it needs to be on the way to Mars for long duration periods. So things like that are interesting. You have biologists who are synthetically engineering microbes to eat old electronic parts and poop out copper as a result, so that you can kind of reuse electronics to build new circuits, which would be really useful, again, for a future human mission to Mars or any long duration space mission. So those are only a couple examples. I've got a ton that I love, but I think this is what's really exciting about space exploration and even on the citizen science side is really the fact that space exploration really requires people from all different disciplines and backgrounds to be contributing to it so that we can get all of these clever solutions.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, when they think of space and space exploration and research, they think of engines and rockets, right? I mean, that's just natural. But you forget, and you see the headlines all the time. There's a lot of non-technical, not non-technical, but non-spacey stuff. Like you say, like biology.
Yeah, there's a lot out there. One of the ones last year was a physical therapist who was funded because he has a novel idea for artificial gravity. So, in the sense of, giving astronauts enough of a feeling of gravity so that it doesn't take as much wear and tear on their body. And so I think this is the thing that I try to remind people is that there's a lot of things that sound very science fiction and out there, but they're actually, utilizing a lot of present day ideas. In tech, for instance, there's a project that was funded that uses computer vision to route rovers on the moon to stay in continuous sunlight. It's a really basic thing for most of us in tech to think about, okay, using computer vision to keep a rover in continuous sunlight, not very difficult, but that hasn't been done before in space. And so I think it's an exciting time to contribute whatever you're working on towards space mission ideas as the future continues to sort of unfold in the space industry.
Yeah, the lag time between technology advancements and when they can actually be implemented on a mission is I don't know, is it getting shorter? But it's always been long.
I think Bobak or Rob would probably have a lot more experience with that. I think they have to be quite patient with building spacecrafts and then having to wait the many years that it takes to launching them and having to sort of future-proof your technology.
Right. Yeah, future-proofing technology and falling within certain guidelines. Back in the day when I was at JPL, it was right as the Challenger explosion happened, and the result of that was that a direct shot for the Galileo mission to Jupiter got diverted, right? Because everyone freaked out about the fact that it had a tiny little radioactive payload. So they didn't want to put enough fuel in there that could endanger people. So it took the long way around. And so that was in the 80s. And now it seems like the time period is shortening between the theoretical to the practical to the deployed as a product. That's not true for the biological sciences, but I think for the material sciences and everything else, it does feel as though that time frame is shortening.
Yeah,
Bobak, does it feel like that to you?
I think one of the big areas that's changed, and it kind of harkening back to the earlier stuff with the lower cost of access to space, also the rise of small satellites, CubeSats, things like that, means that there's a huge platform now that's relatively inexpensive and relatively short timelines. A year or two, if not even less, between when you can make a change and launch them. And I know folks at Planet, and they're on block whatever 70 of their Dove, because and same with SpaceX block 5 or whatever of the Falcon 9. As we increase the frequency of access to space, people can make changes and kind of propagate them, and then we can all take advantage of those. So there were some cell phone based CubeSats the last couple of years, which is pretty incredible to me, given that the processors we have on most of our flagship missions are significantly worse than the cell phones that we have, even the cell phones of when they launched, right? So I mean, they're not huge computing powers. So that the fact that you could kind of play with it, miniaturization of technology, all that stuff, I think it's going to be even better. But I think there's always going to be an inherent concern, legitimate concern about when you're spending large numbers, billions of dollars on missions, that you really do want some significant heritage or provenness of the technology. So, but I think what we'll see is a good portfolio, right? We'll see the Earth satellites can kind of prove out a bunch of stuff quickly, then they make it to the geosats, and then they make it out to the exoplanetary sort of stuff where we'll see a lot of cool things. So it's definitely faster, and can only imagine that pace picks up more in the next few years.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the CubeSats. So there was a company I was looking at a few years ago. I won't mention the name of it. It's here in San Francisco, and they had just successfully launched a couple of CubeSats, and we're working on getting a constellation in place. And for people that are not aware of what they are, they're tiny little 10 centimeter on a side cube that operate in a swarm. Essentially, they call them constellations, but it's a swarm. And the idea is you put them in orbit, and there's no propulsion. You just toss them in orbit, and they just kind of orbit, and then eventually they'll decay, and you just replace the ones that have fallen out of orbit, and you can replace them with components that are more modern. And so, for instance, in an Earth observation satellite, one of the long tails of some of these Earth orbiting systems, or even interplanetary systems, is that you're stuck with the camera and the applications and the physical mechanism that you had when you started building the thing. And if you've got a 7-year launch window, by the time it's launched, it's obsolete. And in the case of the CubeSats, those things are obsolete. You just let them go dead, and you put up 2 more, right? And it's pretty neat, actually. It's a neat thing.
Well, in fact, we've gotten enough capacity worldwide that I hesitate to ever call anything a first, because you might just not know. But we had an example of a couple of things being launched into space without proper notification that some folks got in trouble about.
Yep, that's it's such a frustrating thing, because it just ruins it for everyone else, like on so many levels. Like, so yeah, you're referencing, the startup that launched the things that are more sandwich size than, they're like 1/4 of I think, CubeSat size. And oh my God, yeah. So the worry was that they couldn't be tracked very well, and thus could pose like harm. And something that small inherently can just pose more harm. And it's just frustrating, because even, so first there's the thing of, well, if it could actually pose harm, you're only going to ruin it for yourself and everyone else physically in space by creating debris events, which can ruin other satellites, which can cause international incidents if you ruin another country's satellite, because, whether you like it or not, as a startup, if you're an American startup and you screw up some other country's satellite, you've caused an international incident. That's not awesome. And then there's just the screwing it up for everyone else on the startup side of things, because, one startup going rogue, essentially, and doing something like that means that there are inherently going to be more hurdles put in place for startups to even launch things. And for some startups, that can mean life or death. They already have to go through quite a lot just to even get onto the rocket and launch into space. But if, for instance, the FCC knows that a startup could put something on a rocket that they don't know about, and that they thus have to check it before that rocket goes into space, that's one more hurdle that can mean that a startup gets knocked off of a rocket launch, and they don't get that chance at all, and they don't have enough money to do another one. So, yeah, it was really upsetting to see that happen.
All those things are true, and I don't mean to in any way condone what they did, but it was remarkable to me that we have gotten to a place where that could happen, where we have enough of a wide-ranging space capacity as a species. That, the idea, think about it. The idea of like, oh, I put something into space without getting approval was just laughable for most of my life, right? And so I'm not trying to excuse it or downplay the seriousness of it, but it is kind of crazy that it's like, wow, we actually need to start checking payloads because so many people can do this.
Well, what's interesting about that comment is that, when I was a kid, which was back in the 70s, buddies of mine and I, we'd sit down, we'd do the math, like what would it take? Like how much propulsion would you need to get to orbit, or how could you build the thing? We never actually did it, but we figured out how to do it. But that same drive is this thing that pushed Bezos and Musk and Branson, as kids, these guys they loved this stuff. And their answer to the problem was not to sit in the backyard with metal pipes and try and figure out how to get something in orbit. It was to like, let's go start these companies and make a lot of money so we can start the actual company that we really wanted to start. And it's fascinating. So Ariel, yeah, I agree with you. And it's hard to track those things. At the same point, it is remarkable. Like, it is remarkable that you can swap out the CubeSats again. If you just swap out components as you need to for almost no money, it's amazing. So I don't know where the truth is, and I don't know where it fits, but
yeah. Bobak, does this concern you?
I mean, I have just in general concerns, of course. I mean, I think it's a net good thing. I'm really excited, obviously. I think I'm the same kind of frame of mind as you are, which is it is incredible to live in a time where this is a possibility. But yeah, tracking objects in space is a legitimate concern. And we already know that there's a number of issues with just the objects that we already have in space. Mm-hmm. So creating more of that. Luckily, all these things, I mean, so far have been to relatively low orbits that are going to decay quickly. And we saw that with Humanity Star and a bunch of other things where they're coming back pretty fast. But the capability is only going to get better, and people are going to find ways of of not necessarily properly maintaining or mitigating their debris afterwards. And that is a legitimate concern. Not to necessarily put it onto the small startups, because I do want to see that area grow and get fostered. But we also, from a not necessarily from my personal work perspective, since most of the places that I send things aren't really busy. But from a general perspective, I'd like to see people, be aware of that. And this is no different than any other industry. We should just be aware of our environmental impacts. And
yeah,
that's just now that the environment is expanding to include space, we should take the same concerns.
Yeah, I mean, you think about rivers in old villages. People didn't worry too much about throwing stuff in it because the river just took it away until we got enough people and we created industry, and then polluting the rivers became a problem.
Right.
We're at the river in the village edge with space. Like, we've been throwing things in space because, hey, space, it'll just, you can't fill it up. Well, turns out, if we do enough space stuff, we can. So
yeah.
All right. Well, that music means it's time to move to the next topic. Sarah, you want to kick us off for the next one?
I would love to. So, Rich, you had mentioned a citizen scientist. What is that?
So,
let's talk a little bit more about what that is and how they're using the internet.
Yeah. So it's interesting because, again, going back to when I was a teen geek in the 70s, citizen science involved you and your telescope and a camera mounted on a telescope barrel and doing the clock drive thing, and it was fun, and you wound up connecting with people usually over U.S. postal mail or international postal mail, and coordinating your efforts and astronomy clubs at local high schools and things like that. Things have changed. Right. And, it's interesting that CubeSats was in the previous conversations because it fits into here too. As the price of payloads go way down, the ability of a hobbyist organization or an individual to put up a CubeSat that does something interesting for that organization or individual and can be shared with the world is unique in the history of human civilization. And in the case of astronomy, there are a number of organizations that I was going to name a few, but you can Google them, and there's like 10,000 that have cameras that are running in their backyards or on tops of hills with CCD equipment attached to the end of the barrel, and it's being pumped live over the internet. You can be anywhere in the world right now and watch a solar eclipse, a lunar eclipse live. It's happening. And people are making observations that no one else has before, right? And the more eyeballs that you get on some of the stuff that is going on, the more you can direct research to it. There's a lot of cases of people discovering comets and new stars and what have you, just by looking at the data without actually having any physical equipment. So that particular aspect of what's going on in the world right now is shockingly great. Like, if you told 15-year-old me that was possible, I would not have believed you.
Ariel, I feel like this crosses over into a lot of the stuff that you do too.
Yeah. It's definitely, that's, well, I mean, I'm living proof. I went to art school, and, I'm not a scientist by any means, but now my resume certainly looks more like a scientist resume. But Yeah, there's so much to talk about here. So 10 years ago, I launched spacehack.org, which is a directory of ways for anyone to participate in space exploration. And so it's been really interesting now to see what has changed and what hasn't in the last 10 years in terms of citizen science, specifically to space. And it's an interesting tension because there is a greater perception now than there was 10 years ago that space exploration is more accessible. But how much that's the truth is still, in tension. So there's cool things you can be doing, but I think there's still a problem where a lot of the scientific institutions that could be better enabling citizen scientists, better funding citizen scientists, very much just still view them as an education and public outreach thing. They don't actually incorporate them at the same way they do as other scientists. So actually, for me personally, I actually don't like the term citizen science at all, because to me, it's just science. It's just about opening science up so that it's not something that only a very tiny segment of the population can do.
Well, it's not like scientists aren't citizens either. You're right.
Yeah,
it works both
exactly.
ways.
Yeah. So I don't like the phrase. Like I get why people use the phrase, and I get that like it's a good sort of placeholder for delineating between different types of things that you're trying to reference. But for the most part, I view it as science. And so a lot of my work over the last 10 years has been trying to get us to a point where we just treat it as science, and that people who don't have institutions backing them can get funding from the NSF just as easily as people who do have institutions. And right now that's not the case. So I continue the fight.
Bobak, how do you feel as someone who works inside the industry about the idea of opening this up to people?
I'm a huge fan of opening it up. I work on a project called Panoptes as well, and that is a project designed to allow, similar to to what we were talking about earlier, of having cameras in your backyard imaging, in this case, stars, specifically looking for planetary transits. And with enough cameras, right, looking around the world at the stars repeatedly, you can see the dips in the star brightness and look for exoplanetary transits. And the idea is, to get more people excited and involved and personally connected to the research that's going on. And I like it as well because I think it allows younger people to get involved. It's not a high cost thing necessarily. High school could do it, and we've seen that with the robotics programs in high schools and things like that. It's a great way to sort of get people connected to science and engineering, and it's a great way for them to sort of experience it firsthand rather than. And I'm fortunate that I ended up in this field, but so much of what I did when I was a kid was reading about space in books, which I always think is like reading about swimming. It's great, but you don't actually learn how to swim until you get in the water. And so now seeing that age move younger and younger, it makes me really excited, and I think I want everybody to be a part of it. It's just the more hands, the more science we can do.
I remember a book when I was I keep going back to being a teenager. Sorry about that. I like it because it leaped over the internet age and go back to. But there was a book that I bought called Radio Astronomy for Amateurs or something along those lines. And my astronomy club at high school, we built a radio telescope, and it wasn't hard, right? Yeah. And if people wanted to get involved, and I'm not aware that there is anything like this, and there might actually be, but to build radio telescopes at various places on the planet and link them together on the internet, and you've created something that would have taken hundreds of millions of dollars of costs otherwise to create, and it's just great stuff. It's a lot of fun.
I'll put a very short. I read a book called The Long Space recently by a space economist, Alex McDonald. And what was interesting is you read about early astronomy in the United States. It was all largely kickstarted. It was publicly funded. People would go around collecting, $5 or $10 from citizens, and they would, use that to build out telescopes, like Cincinnati telescope, things like Philadelphia's telescope, schools, some high schools or college kind of telescopes. So people were more directly connected at one point, and it eventually transitioned into this largely government-funded sort of field that we have today. But it's actually nice at some level to see the growth of private industry and individuals going back, because again, we have like things like tech observatories and things like that that are wealthy people who funded them. But I think we're slowly seeing a better balance of the combination of government funding for certain areas, wealthy individuals, and hopefully more and more of this, whether it be with money or just their time and efforts, individuals kind of being connected to it. So I think this is actually a historic thing, is what I'm saying at some level, just that we sort of lost sight of that for a while.
Yeah, and if, in fact, the recent absence of it might be more of an exception
Right.
than the norm. Interesting.
We need more people involved in science, and starting at an early level, and starting at a Ariel, I'll say non-professional, at a non-professional level, and getting an educated crowd in science started again. I think it's important, and I think recent situations around the world have shown how important it actually is, that there's not a lot of science literacy going on at the highest levels of government.
Well, and then there's the idea that getting kids involved, and we touched on this, is important because then they develop confidence with it and maybe end up going into it. What about projects beyond just SETI at home or something like that are more like what Bobak was talking about, where people of any age, whether you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, or older, can participate just for the enjoyment of it?
Yeah, I mean, I try and tackle that with Science Hack Day, which is an event that gets scientists and designers and developers and all different types of people together in the same physical space to prototype something over a weekend. Science Hack Day is now in 29 countries, so it's been growing a bit. And it's really exciting because, I think what I always try and communicate is that, if you want to change your career and go into science, awesome. But if you love your career, or if you love what you're already doing, you don't have to change anything. You don't need to drop everything, go get a different degree. You can get involved and you can play around with things and actually contribute to science, over a weekend. And so with Science Hack Day, we've had things that become multi-year, student-led research programs that came out of Science Hack Day, weird collaborations. We have equally scientists who are contributing to fields that they otherwise have no opportunity to. So, getting particle physicists to collaborate with jellyfish biologists because they love, the particle physicist loves jellyfish, and just, it was a career he never got to go into, so.
Never got stung by one, apparently. Yeah.
Right, exactly. But, so I think this is the really important thing that I think the science industry, unfortunately, I would have to shame them a bit about doing, is because they do inadvertently sometimes communicate that, oh, we lost this person to science. They didn't go into science. Now, I guess we'll have to just keep focusing on all the little kids. But that's not reality. You have people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, so on, who have really interesting ways of looking at the world and really interesting skill sets that would be really beneficial to science and space. And I think the science industry is reckless by not better engaging with these people, again, on a equal level, not treating them as some sort of education outreach, but actually treating them as people who can contribute meaningfully to things and actually develop more clever solutions that the science industry couldn't develop on its own. I think that's really what's needed more. And so Science Hack Day is one example. NIAC is another. And my hope is that, there will be more opportunities that focus, on people of all ages.
Yeah, because there's lots of cool programs out there. There's weather programs for people to just contribute local weather information. There's a Raspberry Pi program where you can actually track flights to help FlightAware increase its database. So it's not just space, but there's lots of cool space stuff out there as well. All right, to our final topic for today's show. This one was suggested by our patrons at patreon.com/DTNS, particularly those at the advisor level. They voted that they wanted to hear us talk about how close are we to the big accomplishments: base on the moon, mining an asteroid, living on Mars. What's it going to take? for us to do all of these things that we've been reading about in science fiction and seeing on Star Trek and movies and TV shows. When's that going to happen, Bobak? No, like how close are we, and what kinds of things need to happen?
I mean, I am eternally optimistic that we're close. And obviously, I wouldn't pick a profession to work in that I wasn't optimistic about. I still think it's a ways away. I think there's a ton of technologies to be proven out. The good news is that we're slowly looking at that, right? We have, data now for radiation environments from Earth to Mars, for example, which humans should be deeply concerned about. We're hopefully demonstrating some technologies on the Mars 2020 rover that will prove be able to take oxygen from the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. That's critical for not just for humans to live there, but to if you want to come back and you want the oxygen for your return flight.
An important thing.
Yeah, an important thing for fuel and for breathing. So all of those are sort of technologies that we need to demonstrate. I think again, we're excited again. Maybe it feels like. With the developments in private industry, they feel like we're once again sort of picking up the pace of progress. But I feel like we've also just been really fortunate in this recent kind of set of developments. And once humans are sort of on top of some of these rockets, it's going to be a very different pace again, and rightfully so, because human lives are more valuable than our robots and our electronics and things like that. So I still think it's 10, 15 years before we get humans to Mars, and it'll still be a very select group of people. I think that the good news is everybody I've talked to in the kind of space tourism side really thinks that this is a thing that is meant to be like a very expensive family vacation in the next 10, 15 years, that the focus will be on rather than buying a new car, or rather than adding a home onto your house or whatever else, or buying an extra a house with an extra room on it, that you would save that money and put it towards like the family trip to space. And I think that seems like a very reasonable first step. Asteroid mining still feels like a ways away to me. I suspect that the first generation is kind of an IP grab, which is to say that people will be looking for the asteroids that have the interesting minerals, knowing where they are in their orbits, and try to use that information to hopefully then sell to somebody who wants to actually go out there and spend the money and the resources to get it. Because I don't necessarily know that the mining companies themselves will pop up overnight, but somebody who might need that resource may be willing to invest in it.
Yeah, I think the common perception is asteroid mining. Well, that's the easy one, right? You just dig up the rocks and bring it back, but it's still weight. It's still, and it weighs more. If you're going to bring it back an appreciable amount, it weighs more than bringing a couple of humans would weigh. Definitely
does, although it doesn't come with the complexity, hopefully, of spacecraft.
Right. You don't have to keep the minerals alive.
Right.
Rob, what do you think?
I'm weighing my comments here because I don't want them to be taken wrong. I think this is one area where commercialization will pay off. If you start talking about Mars colonies and asteroid mining and pulling minerals out of the atmosphere of Jupiter and things like that, there has to be the best way to do that is through commercialized incentive, right? If a company will spend $500 million to go to a place to reclaim natural resources that are worth $10 billion, you bet your bottom dollar that is absolutely going to happen. And whether it happens with electronic gathering robots or with people is yet to be determined, but it will be the thing that pushes us forward. And it's the one area I believe that the government will lag behind on. I think government agencies will lag behind on it. If the intent is research and human expansion into space, that's where the government will lead, right? Yeah. And so it depends on the fork in the road that you want to go into, is how close we are to getting to where we have to go to.
Ariel, what about you?
Yeah, so I guess to qualify everything, so I was on a National Academy of Sciences committee on the future of human spaceflight, And we were explicitly tasked with looking into things like this about, what does the future of human spaceflight look like? When it comes to landing humans on the surface of Mars, our report found that in the extremely most optimistic of scenarios, we would be landing humans on Mars in the 2050s. And it was something that really, on a personal level, profoundly changed my perspective on this, because I always viewed it as, we went to the moon, we can go to Mars. Mars is a bit harder, but we can do it. No biggie. Yeah, I don't feel that way anymore. Everyone else is laughing because it's Mars is considerably hard when it comes to landing humans on the surface.
It's hard with robots.
Yeah, it's hard enough with
robots.
Yeah, so it's something where it's also a trying time for NASA specifically, because they continue to be given flat budgets, and our report found that with flat budgets, NASA can't really do much more beyond humans being in cislunar space, which means not even landing on the moon, just hanging out around the moon. So it's a difficult time right now, and it's something where it's made me personally wish that sort of my generation of millennials and everything has more of an attitude of being thankful if we do get a human to land on the surface of Mars in our lifetime, because it's possible, but it's not guaranteed. And I feel sad when I hear a lot of baby boomers and people in older generations saying that, oh, we were supposed to have, moon cities by now. And they seem very bitter about that. And I don't want millennials getting old and saying the same stuff. I want them to be thankful if it happens, but not bitter, because I think there are a lot of people that, both on the government side and on the commercial side, who are being very vague about these timelines. But that said, there's a lot of really exciting stuff that can happen in the interim. Sending a human to orbit Mars, totally possible on a much shorter time frame. Getting humans to be on the surface of the moon again, I think you're seeing a ton of international involvement in that, and international partners leading the way in that. And I think that will definitely be, delivered upon. So there will be exciting things that happen in our lifetime, but I want to kind of get everyone used to the idea that landing humans on the surface of Mars and having Mars cities and anything like that, like, if it happens while you're alive, just like kiss the ground, because that will be an amazing time to be alive, and it's not guaranteed to happen in your lifetime. So, I think the thing that's really exciting about it is that it's going to require a lot of international collaboration, no matter what. So whether it's, a company who's really heavily involved in it, or a government agency, it's so expensive and so difficult that no one entity can do it alone. And so this is where it's going to be really exciting, because it's really going to require so much more collaboration than the moon landings ever did.
Yeah, I think about the moon landing, and I don't think it is a simple motivation, but there was a unique cross section of things happening. It wasn't just the Cold War, but there was, like a post-war relief, a post-war boom, a space race. There was competition. There were all these things that combined to really motivate people to do that, and it's hard to make that happen. Nobody made that happen. It just sort of, there was a confluence of events. So I wonder sometimes, like, what confluence of events could we make happen? I look at some of the things that Elon Musk does with SpaceX, and I'm like, well, maybe that kind of showmanship is one example of that, where you play some David Bowie and put a mannequin on a car, and suddenly people pay attention. That's not the important part of the launch, but it gets people's imagination fired up again.
Yeah, it was interesting. Like, I'm going to admit this, and I'm sorry I have to. I think I'm probably the oldest person on the panel here, and so I lived through that period, and I distinctly remember my very first. I have two very first early memories. One is Bobby Kennedy getting shot, and the other is John Glenn. And so I watched that whole thing, and as a kid, it was the thing that made me get science degrees. It was the thing that pushed me into school to get a degree in astronomy, and a degree in mathematics, and a degree in computer science, which is what I have. And I think if I did not have that in my background, I wouldn't have gone into the fields that I did. And I think it's true now. And so Ariel, it's as you're feeling sad about hearing people from my generation talk with certain bitterness about we should be living under the ocean and on the moon by now. I still think that the rate, we talked about this earlier, the rate of progression of technology and advancement, it is exponential. And I don't think it's unreasonable to expect that in your generation you'll be on the surface of Mars.
It's not unreasonable. It's just it's the cautionary thing of it's not guaranteed. It is so difficult. I know that we will get there someday. I will say that sort of optimism, but I just try and be cautionary about, I don't want people to see what doesn't happen and not get excited about all the awesome stuff that we are doing. I guess that's sort of my message. Yeah.
Of course. You also don't want to have them hit the brakes either. I mean, the amount that we know now is so much more than the amount that we knew when I was in my 20s. It's you couldn't fill a room of books with it, right? And that will only advance. And so we know more about Mars. We know what it's composed of. We know how to get there. We know how to, there's a lot of things that we now know. And I think with the proper motivation, what Tom was referring to earlier, with that confluence of events, absolutely we can do it.
Yeah, your dog agrees. I'm with you. No, you're talking about memories. One of my earliest memories was the Soyuz link up, getting Pop-Tarts and getting up early and watching cosmonauts and astronauts shake hands in space. I didn't get that feeling about space stuff. I was a huge space shuttle fan. I remember watching the Enterprise take a piggyback ride, on an airplane. I didn't really get that feeling until that crazy space crane was confirmed to have landed its payload successfully on Mars. Those are the kinds of things that really fire us up, and I don't think they're stopping. I think it's just a matter of pace, and maybe we don't need to go faster. I'm just greedy because I'm getting older too, and I want to see this stuff. I want to go on those space tourism packages. Hopefully, I'll have enough money when in my old age to do it. Well, I guess that means we have finished this up. Thank you guys. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I have. This has been really fun chatting about this stuff. Before we go, let's thank all of our panelists. Bobak, if people want to find out more about you, follow what you're doing, where should they go?
I am Tweets Out Loud on Twitter and Instagram. And Monday, right, Ariel? We have an episode.
Oh, yes. Yeah, Monday we have an episode going on Tested about Europa Report for a new sci-fi thing that I'm doing with the Tested YouTube channel. Excellent.
Well, go check that out. I love the Tested folks. That's fantastic. And Ariel, anything else you've got to tell people about?
Yeah, I mean, you can find links to all of my many projects on arielwaldman.com. That's always a good place to go. Yeah, you can find my book, my YouTube channel, Twitter, all that stuff that I referenced today, I think is on there. So that's a great place.
Rob DeMilo, thank you again as well. Where can people find you?
If you go to About Me/Rob DeMilo, you'll find links to all my stuff on there, and the CTO page at nimblecollective.com, of course. But
excellent. Go check that out as well. Thanks to our patrons, patreon.com/DTNS that make this possible. If you'd like more of these kinds of shows, we're only a couple $1,000s away from our next level that would allow us to do more roundtable episodes a month. Join in on the fun or up your pledge and get some of our cool perks like extended shows, exclusive columns, and more at patreon.com/DTNS.
Our email address is feedback@dailytechnewsshow.com. We're live Monday through Friday at 4:30 p.m. Eastern, 21:30 now. Again, UTC at Alpha Geek Radio and MNClub.tv. And our website is dailytechnewsshow.com.
Back on Monday, talking robots with Rob Reed. We'll see you then.
This show is part of the Frog Pants Network. Get more at frogpants.com.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.
Oh, that was so much fun, you guys.
It was great.
It's not 21:30. It's
No, the template didn't get changed. Sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I should have known that. As I was saying it, I was like, that's not right. UTC is 2030.
I keep UTC in my head. Who doesn't?
That was amazing. Thank you guys so much.
Good.
Yes, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks.
Ariel, Bobak, good to meet you guys.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, thank you guys for doing this, and great to meet you, Bobak. It was really
good
fun.
to meet you.
No, it was awesome to have you guys.
Use cameras on my bookshelf for next time. I see everybody's got cameras on their bookshelves, guys.
You have to hang the Enterprise E.
I do. It's a little sad. The stand didn't make it, so it's just hanging out.
Well, we're just going to hang out on our stream for a little bit at the end. But if you guys need to take off, take off. You've been very generous with your time.
That's always fun.
But feel free to stick around when we come up with an amazing title.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. I forgot to do my lower third.
Yes. Yay,
Well,
space.
It's showbot.chatroom.net.
Where people in our chat room will submit titles while we're going.
Regained from space. Regained.
We need science.
Where's Len, by the way? I thought Len was going to be.
Oh yeah, Len couldn't make it. He usually illustrates on Fridays. We have a little live art.
Mars is hard. Bitter about moon cities.
I'm not bitter about moon cities.
Wow.
I don't think I was ever really. See, my whole space thing revolved around the first Columbia launch because we watched that in class, first grade.
I remember that era. I remember the watching it in class era.
I was in my first grade Catholic school at St. Cecilia's with Mrs. Lahane, and we had to draw pictures of the space shuttle. And you do that stupid thing that all kids do. You got to post that stupid thing. It's a cute thing because my kid will be doing that, I'm sure, in a couple of years. You post it on the thing, but you would have to write. We wrote letters to NASA, and because you're a kid at that age, I guess I was what, 7, 6. It's all printed and it's on that piece of paper that has like the dotted lines in the middle, so the kid knows where to aim, where the middle of the J starts, and your A is, and all that stuff. Good times, good times.
Yay space for our title.
Yay space. Yeah.
I would capitalize space though.
Yeah.
I would like it to be Roger 2 mics over here. With his one mic on his head and one on his mouth. What's happening?
When one isn't enough.
Redundancy.
Yeah.
Well, part of it is I misunderstood.
Redundancy.
I misunderstood the concept of stereo.
That's because you only have one ear.
Actually, I secretly run an in and out drive-through to make a show. So while you guys are talking about micro satellites, I duck out with a little whiteboard and I take down, shout them in.
I thought I heard you say double a couple of times during the show.
Double is Tim Hortons. It's a 2x2, right? Isn't that what it is?
I don't know. You're the one that works on it now.
4x4, animal style. What's the protein style where they don't give you the bun?
It's definitely 4x4. You're right.
4x4. You get it's a Neapolitan, which is where they do the strawberry vanilla chocolate milkshake together.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Makes me want to drive over there. Fortunately, I'm in between, I guess, 4 miles of 2 in and outs. One over at the Americana, and the one over in Burbank by the freeway by 134. Is it 5? Oh, I'm still trying to get down the freeways.
Yeah, what is it? I've always lived between in and outs. Now that I think about it, not always, but we didn't even have them in Illinois. But we live there's one in Marina Del Rey, and there's one over in Culver City. Oh, they're not. Neither one's near. They're about the equidistant. And when we lived in San Rafael, it was the same thing. There was like one down in Marin City, I think, and then there was
the in and out edge network.
Yeah,
you have to be close to an in and out center.
Yeah, they only have one in California, one in Texas. Wherever their 2 facilities are for meat processing, you have to be within a day's drive of them.
Oh, really? Is that the
They
deal?
don't, yeah, they don't freeze the patties, so you have to be within some short distance of their
Okay.
their like factory.
So good.
Yeah,
How's
it's probably on the
going
5.
on
It's
in-
probably one of those places where you drive past it on the 5 and you smell it and you're like, oh, that's probably the In-N-Out cow plant.
I wonder what they do with all the leftover parts. I mean, I'm sure they just turn it into dog food.
That's probably true. That's
Yeah.
probably true. But,
It's like those.
So, by the way,
I-
Tom and Sarah, you need to get together and you need to buy Roger a backdrop. Like that.
Yeah, I get it.
That is your good deed for the
My
year.
backdrop is a grounded reality of home life.
It's way too
Right?
grounded. It is way too grounded.
I have a 3-year-old daughter. I believe me. It doesn't. It's going to get a lot more.
Rob,
grounded.
we spent so much money on Roger's backdrop. You don't like
You
it?
not like we could have done like a green screen, like we went like
Come on,
That's
very reality.
that's prime IKEA duvet on
We
that
spared
bed.
no expense. Yeah.
It also doubles as my kid's trampoline, apparently.
Now that would be cool. Just have your kid bouncing on.
Oh yeah, that'd be fun.
Just
So you
have-
keep bouncing and
Have them
then
come through the door.
Yeah, that's right.
oh,
Be a viral
does.
sensation.
Oh, yeah. Just like the BBC correspondent.
Mhm.
Oh gosh.
actually, what
Yeah.
made it funny was the wife coming in.
Oh, that was just
Like, no.
priceless.
My wife would just look at her and me and then shrug. It's like, yeah, what can you do?
Well, for a long time, when before Ellie was walking, she would just sit on Roger's lap during the show.
Yeah, I would. She would either be on my shoulder or on my lap.
Yeah.
And since she was sleeping, it would be great. She was quiet.
And then she learned to talk and walk.
Yeah. Well, she hasn't learned the full talking yet. It's still half gibberish. Some fully formed words.
That's what she got for listening to us all those things on your lap.
I don't know. Maybe that's all she remembers is like in her dreams.
Have you all seen the like I've seen tweets go by of like, oh, my son or daughter, like when I tuck them in now says like, remember to subscribe on YouTube, because I think that's like what you say like when you're like I'm out for the
When
night.
you're done.
Yeah.
So one of the things, I don't know if any of
Good
you
night. Like and
kids,
subscribe.
Yeah.
but, small
Like and
kids,
subscribe.
but
Good night.
one of the big trends is, of course, is the YouTube kids channel or station or platform, and one of the things that a lot of these YouTubers that aim at kids start off with is, "Hey guys," and so for the longest time, anytime she would meet people, she would say, "Hey guys."
Oh,
Hey
wow.
guys, this.
That's
And-
a onlineism.
yeah, it's just like Or the other one she does is, "Isn't this cute?" Like she's just pointing, "Isn't this cute?" Because that's what they like.
because that's like something
That's a
woman
YouTube thing.
says.
Like they show
Yeah.
things,
Yeah.
and like they do surprise eggs, which is like a variation on a Kinder egg.
Right, yeah.
They open it, and you get a surprise. It's like, "Ooh, isn't this cute?" And so she just points at things. Isn't that cute? Isn't this cute?
These poor children.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna start doing that when I leave people. Like and subscribe.
Yeah. 2030 UTC, so cute.
Yeah. Remember, support us on Patreon. Oh, we chuckle about it now, but I guarantee you, in at least a half a dozen years, a lot of that stuff is going to creep into
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
commonplace.
It'll be interesting to see.
Half a dozen years. It's happening now.
Yeah.
Hashtag. Oh yeah, people say hashtag a lot.
Yeah.
Oh god. I hate
Mhm.
that. I actually don't like that at all.
Hashtag don't like.
Your hashtag would break because it's got an apostrophe in it.
Well, my fear is the Twitter lead spellings of things, like people just forgetting how to spell
Oh, people were
forgetting
doing
it's
that
the
with
language
SMS.
out. And
Yeah, that was SMS era.
That was. I remember there was a student in England. She went to court because her teacher failed her because she wrote a report and it was all like SMS.
Lead speak.
Yeah, and so she's like, "No, you can't write it." It's like, no, this is perfectly legitimate way to communicate. This is how we communicate with each other.
there's an argument that goes that is true.
We are. What are we? French? We don't have an academy for that.
Well, the language progresses, and if you go back, far enough, you'll see like words
Oh, yeah.
dropping out and popping into play. And there's an
Absolutely.
argument that I've heard that I want to argue against, but I can't really. That it's just part of the language evolution.
Mm-hmm.
So.
There's all kinds of examples that I probably can't think of right now if I try, but of words that we say that are perfectly legitimate now that used to be thought to be ridiculous. That they were.
I know a lot of Americanisms that creep into business are
Well, okay is a worldwide word now, and it was made up. It was just made up in the late 1800s. It doesn't even have a real meaning.
Okay.
Moving forward. That was the one everyone hated. Moving forward, the company is going to.
Well, we have to adjust our paradigms to the realities of the market.
Yeah. Out of pocket was the one that used to bug me because it started meaning I will pay instead of the company paying, and then people started to take it to mean I'll be gone.
Yeah.
Oh, see, when I hear that, I think, they won't have their phone with them. I'm out of pocket.
Their phone won't be in their pocket.
Funny. Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
That's actually a logical.
That kind of makes sense. Makes much more sense than I'm not available.
Yeah.
And,
all right. Well, I'm publishing the show now, so I guess we can wrap this up. Thanks everybody for hanging out.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks.
you guys are awesome.
Guys.
And if you guys are
Thank you.
totally down for it, I would love to do it again sometime in the future.
Yeah, sure.
I want to come over to your place though, Roger, and use your
we could
backdrop.
all be sitting on this bed.
Yes. I'll
Please
score
do
some
that.
in and
That
out.
would be amazing.
Yeah, I'll bring the in and out over for sure.
Okay.
Awesome.
Well, then we need to
Fly
have
down
like
to
an
that.
SF cohort so that we
Yeah, I
can do
agree.
SF in LA.
Oh, we should all meet somewhere in between or down here, up there.
We can meet in an in and out on the
I was
5.
just gonna say, we need to-
Or we can meet at the Harris Ranch. They have chairs and tables on the 5.
Oh, it smells terrible though.
Oh, because it smells like meat. And
No.
I think you get used to it pretty fast. You
Yeah.
sit there for like 30 minutes, you'll be fine.
All right. Harris Ranch it is.
Done.
that was easy.
We could have chosen somewhere nice, like Morro Bay or anything along the coast.
all right.
Maybe the 5.
Why? Really? Why?
Kind of
Well,
second that emotion there.
fine. Well. I don't know. What's nice? Well, what's the?
San Francisco.
Oh, look at you. Yes.
That's far.
You come here often enough.
Don't you
Sure.
work in the rocket factory? Come on.
I was there Wednesday. I was there Wednesday in Oakland.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Apparently.
Oh, you could totally kick it up with Rob.
Yeah.
There you go.
I'm here already. Now I'm in Oakland.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Oh,
just
that's-
I'll meet over at your place, Rob.
You're welcome to it. My dog can like bark at you.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
I'll
right.
just
You
be
have a new
playing.
dog.
I'll just be playing with the dog the whole time is the problem. I just won't be paying attention to you guys. I'll just be like, ooh, there's a dog.
Cool. Awesome. So let me stop the live feed. Thank you everyone for watching. Remember Monday, Rob Reed.